The worst part wasn't finding them together. The worst part was realizing my entire family had known for months. And not one of them said a word to me. I've spent a lot of time thinking about where exactly things started to fall apart. Not the moment I found out, but before that. The small things I missed because I trusted too much and paid attention too little. I was 31 years old, working as a licensed contractor and project manager for a mid-size construction firm in Columbus, Ohio. I'd spent the last 4 years building something real, a career, a home, a future, the kind of life where you drive to work on a Monday morning and actually feel okay about it. My best friend since 9th grade was a guy named Fletcher. We'd grown up 2 streets apart in the same suburb, went to the same high school, even ended up at Ohio State, together before our paths split a little. Him into finance, me into construction management, but we stayed close as if way some friendships do. The kind where you can go 3 weeks without talking and pick right back up like no time passed. He was the guy who helped me move into my first apartment, who drove 4 hours to be at my dad's funeral, who stood next to me at every milestone that mattered. My fiancée was a woman named Celeste. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months. She was smart, funny, the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and your sister's birthday in the same breath. I thought I knew her the way you think you know someone when you've shared a bed and a bathroom. And 1,000 ordinary Tuesday evenings with them. Fletcher had been going through a rough stretch. Divorce proceedings, apartment fell through, some credit card debt that got away from him. He asked if he could crash with us for a few weeks while he sorted things out. Celeste said yes before I even finished asking her. I thought that was generous. I thought that said something good about her. About both of them. He stayed for 6 months. I know. In hindsight it's obvious. But I was working long hours on a commercial development project in Dublin, Ohio. 45 minutes away. Early mornings. Sometimes late nights. I came home tired most days. I trusted the 2 people in my house. The thing about working in construction is that your schedule gets rearranged constantly. Inspections get moved, weather delays push timelines, subcontractor calls out and suddenly your whole afternoon shifts. On a Wednesday in late October, a city inspector postponed our walkthrough by 2 days. I had nothing to do afternoon. I texted Celeste that I was heading home early. She didn't respond. Which wasn't unusual. She worked from home and sometimes got absorbed in meetings. I pulled into the driveway at 1:15 in the afternoon. I heard them before I opened the door. I stood there on my own front porch for probably 10 seconds, keys in my hand, not moving. Some part of my brain was still trying to find another explanation. A TV, a podcast, anything. But I knew, you always know. I didn't yell, I didn't throw anything. I walked upstairs and I opened the bedroom door, and I stood in the doorway and I looked at them, and they looked at me, and nobody said anything for what felt like a very long time. Fletcher said my name. Just my name, like that was a sentence. Celeste said Ryan. I held up one hand. I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. Not in my bedroom, not like this. I told them both to get out of my house. I told them they had 20 minutes and I was going downstairs, and when I came back up I needed them gone. Then I walked back down, sat at my kitchen table, and stared at the wall. They left. I sat there until it got dark. The part that came next is the part I still think about the most. Because finding out about Fletcher and Celeste was devastating, but it wasn't what broke something permanent in me. What did that was the phone call I made to my mother that night. She picked up on the second ring. I told her what happened. I was calm. I'd been sitting alone for 4 hours, and I'd already moved past the part where I cried, into the part where everything felt very flat and quiet. I told her I found Fletcher and Celeste together in our bedroom. I told her I sent them both away. I told her I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I needed to talk to someone. There was a pause. And then my mother said, Ryan, I need you to really think before you do anything you can't take back. I asked her what that meant. She said Fletcher was going through a hard time. She said Celeste loved me. She really believed that. She said sometimes people made mistakes, and the people who mattered most were the ones who found a way through. I asked her how long she'd known. Another pause. Longer this time. She said she'd heard something a few weeks ago from my Aunt Linda, who had seen Fletcher's car at our house late one night when she was driving past. My mother said she hadn't wanted to say anything until she knew for sure, because she didn't want to cause unnecessary drama. Unnecessary drama. I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, which I'd stripped and remade with different sheets, because I wasn't going to sleep on those. And I stared at the ceiling and I ran the math. My mother had known for weeks. My aunt had known long enough to tell my mother, which meant my mother had sat across from me at Sunday dinner and asked me how the project was going, and told me she thought Celeste seemed really happy lately, and said nothing. I called my older brother the next morning. He's 4 years older than me, lives across town, always been the more measured one in the family. I thought maybe he'd be different. I thought maybe he'd be furious on my behalf. He said, "Look man, Fletcher's been your best friend since you were 15. You really want to throw that away?" I said. He slept with my fiancée in my house. My brother said, I know, that's bad, but people go through stuff. Have you talked to him yet? Actually talked? I said I hadn't, and I wasn't going to. And I didn't understand why everyone in this family seemed more concerned about Fletcher's feelings than mine. He said, nobody's more concerned about Fletcher. We just don't want you to blow up your whole life over this. I want you to understand something. I am not a dramatic person. I don't make scenes. I don't send angry texts or post vague things online or call people at midnight. I am by nature and by profession a problem solver. When something goes wrong on a job site, you don't panic. You assess. You figure out what's structurally compromised, what can be repaired, what needs to come down entirely. You make a plan and you execute it. So that's what I did. Celeste and I were not married. We were engaged. The house was mine. I'd bought it 2 years before we got together, and her name was never on the deed. That was important. I called my real estate attorney that Friday, a woman I'd worked with on several commercial deals, and I told her I needed to make sure everything was in order. She confirmed I was the sole owner. Good. Step 2. Celeste had a key. Fletcher had a key. I'd given him one when he moved in. I called a locksmith that same day and had the locks changed. Both doors. Step 3. We had a joint savings account that we'd opened to save for the wedding. About $11,000 in it. I went to the bank that afternoon and spoke to a manager I'd dealt with before. Because we weren't married, and because I had documentation showing my contributions exceeded hers significantly, I was able to initiate a process to separate the funds. I didn't take her portion. I didn't touch what she'd put in, but I moved my contributions into a separate account and closed the joint one. I kept records of everything. Step 4. The engagement ring. It had belonged to my grandmother. My mother had given it to me 2 years ago to propose with, and I had proposed with it. It was a family piece. Before Celeste collected the rest of her things, I sent her a text. Brief, factual, no emotion, explaining that the ring was a family heirloom, and I'd be needing it back. She dropped it off in a small envelope through the mail slot. 3 days later I didn't respond. Step 5. Fletcher's things. He'd accumulated more stuff in my house than I'd realized. Some of it was in the guest room. Some had migrated to the garage. I boxed everything carefully, labeled the boxes, and left them on my covered front porch with a text to Fletcher, telling him he had until Sunday to pick them up before I donated them. He picked them up Saturday morning. I didn't answer the door. What I did not do, I did not yell. I did not threaten. I did not post anything online. I did not contact his employer or his family or anyone in our mutual social circle. What I also did not do, for about 3 weeks, tell anyone else what had happened. I wasn't hiding it. I just wasn't ready to manage other people's reactions on top of my own. The family meeting happened because my mother arranged it. She called and said she thought it would be good for everyone to sit down together. That Fletcher wanted a chance to speak. That Celeste wanted to explain. She said she'd talked to my brother and my Aunt Linda, and they all agreed this was the best pair forward. I want to say, I declined. I should have declined. But I went. Because some part of me still wanted to believe that if I walked into that room, someone would look me in the eye and say they were sorry. Really sorry. Not sorry, but just sorry. My mother's house. A Sunday afternoon in November. I got there a few minutes early. And my mother hugged me at the door in the way she does when she's already decided to manage the situation rather than feel it. And there was Fletcher sitting in the chair by the window. And there was Celeste on the couch. And my Aunt Linda was in the kitchen, pretending to make coffee. And my brother was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, looking like a man who had already said his piece privately, and was now just here to make sure nobody got loud. My mother sat down across from me. Fletcher spoke first. He said he was sorry. He said it the way people say it when they've rehearsed it. Smooth, even, the words in the right order. He said he'd been in a dark place. That things happened that he never intended. That he valued our friendship more than anything and he hoped I could find it in me to understand. That people weren't always their best selves when they were struggling. Didn't say anything. Celeste cried. I'll give her this. Her tears looked real. She said she loved me. She said it was a mistake that spiraled out of control, and she didn't know how to stop it. And she was so ashamed. And she wanted to fix it. My mother looked at me with that expression she's had my whole life. The one that means be reasonable, Ryan. I said, how long? Celeste looked at Fletcher. That look alone told me everything I needed to confirm. She said 4 months. Fletcher said, it wasn't. I mean, it started as. I said, I didn't ask you. My Aunt Linda came in from the kitchen with a tray of coffee cups and set it on the table like we were having a pleasant visit. My mother said, Ryan, I think what matters now is where we go from here. Fletcher has always been family to us. Celeste loves you. People make mistakes. I said you knew, for weeks. And you sat across from me at dinner and said nothing. She said, I didn't want to hurt you before I had to. I said, so you waited until someone else hurt me instead. She didn't have an answer for that. She opened her mouth and closed it, and looked at my brother, who looked at the floor. I stood up. I picked up my jacket. I said, very quietly, that I wasn't interested in a path forward that included either of them, and that I was disappointed in every single person in that room, and that I was going home. My Aunt Linda said, "Ryan, don't be dramatic." I left. I drove home and I sat in my driveway for a while. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry, exactly, I was something more like recalibrating. Like a piece of equipment that's been running on a faulty reading, and has finally received accurate data and is adjusting accordingly. I had spent a long time building my life around a set of people I believed in. I was very good at my job because I understood that structures are only as sound as their foundations. I had just discovered that several of my foundations were not what I thought they were. So I did what I do. I assessed, I planned, I built something better. I reached out to a former colleague who'd moved to Nashville 2 years prior, and had been trying to recruit me to his firm ever since. I told him I was interested. He said the position was still open. It was a senior project manager role overseeing large-scale residential developments. Better pay, better title, better growth trajectory. I flew down in December for interviews. I got the offer before Christmas. I gave notice at my firm in Columbus in January. They were sorry to lose me. I was sorry to go, in the sense that I'd put years into that place. But I wasn't sad. I was ready. I listed the house in February. The Columbus market was strong. I'd done considerable work on the property over the years, knew exactly what I'd put into it and what it was worth, and I priced it right. It sold in 9 days over asking. After the mortgage payoff and closing costs, I cleared just under $90,000. I put 80 of it into a high-yield savings account, and kept the rest liquid for the move. I found an apartment in East Nashville, signed a lease starting March 1st, donated what I didn't want to take, and left. I did not throw a going-away party. I did not send a mass text. I did not post anything about the move on social media. I changed my phone number. A few people from my life figured it out. A coworker I trusted, my cousin on my dad's side who'd always been decent. 1 or 2 friends who weren't connected to Fletcher. I gave my new number to those people. I did not give it to my mother, my brother, or my Aunt Linda. I want to be clear, I didn't do this out of spite. I did it because I understood finally that those people were not going to change. My mother was never going to call me and say, "I should have told you the moment I found out, and I am sorry I didn't." My brother was never going to say, "What happened to you was wrong and I should have been on your side without conditions." My Aunt Linda was never going to say anything useful ever. They were who they were. I wasn't punishing them. I was just done. Nashville took some getting used to. I'm not going to pretend the first few months were easy. I was building a new work team from scratch, learning a new city, eating dinner alone in a 1-bedroom apartment more nights than not. There were evenings that were harder than I expected. Sundays especially. Sundays had always been the family day, and without that structure, they felt very long. But I was also, for the first time in a long time, not managing anyone else's comfort. I wasn't softening my reactions for my mother. I wasn't moderating my feelings for my brother. I wasn't performing normalcy for Celeste. I was just myself in a quiet apartment rebuilding. I got good at my job in a new city. I made friends slowly, the way adults make friends. Through work and through a recreational soccer league, I joined mostly to have something to do on Saturday mornings. I started running again, which I'd given up sometime in the previous 2 years without noticing. I got a dog, a 3-year-old rescue named Carl, who had strong opinions about bedtime and no opinions about anything else. It was a good life. A quiet life. Mine. About 2 years after I left Columbus, my mother found my new number. I still don't know how. My cousin swore it wasn't him, and I believe him, so it must have been some combination of social media and determination. She called on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner. I almost didn't answer. I looked at the screen for probably 4 rings. Then I answered. She said, "Ryan, it's Mom." I said I knew. She said she'd been trying to reach me for a long time. She said she missed me. She said the family wasn't the same without me at holidays. I said I was sorry to hear that. She said, "And this is the part I want you to remember." She said, "Fletcher's in a really bad place right now. His finances are a mess and he's been having some health issues. And I think he really needs his friend back. He's asked about you. He talks about you all the time." I held the phone and I looked out my kitchen window at the Nashville skyline going orange in the evening light. I said, "Mom, when I called you the night I found out, you told me not to do anything I couldn't take back. Do you remember that?" She was quiet. I said, "I want you to think about whether you ever said that to Fletcher. Whether you ever told him, before any of this happened or after, that he should think about what he couldn't take back. Whether you gave him the same advice." She said, "That's not fair, Ryan." I said, "I know. A lot of things weren't fair. I made my peace with that. I hope you can make your peace with where things stand now." She said my name one more time, the way mothers do when they're hoping the sound of it will work on you. I said goodbye. I told her, I hoped she was well and I meant it. Then I ended the call and went back to making dinner. Carl was sitting in the kitchen doorway watching me with the particular expression he reserves. For situations he has no opinion about. I put his bowl down, he ate, I cooked. The Nashville skyline finished its transition from orange to purple to dark. A week after that, I got a text from an unknown number. It took me about 30 seconds to recognize the writing style. Fletcher. He said he'd gotten my number from my mother. He said he knew things had ended badly, and he took full responsibility and he'd grown a lot as a person. And he was in a different place now, he said. He missed his friend, and he thought we could find a way back to something. I read it twice. I put my phone face down on the coffee table. I've thought about what I would say if I ever had to explain myself to someone who didn't understand why I made the choices I made. Why I didn't try to work it out. Why I didn't show up to that family meeting ready to forgive. Why I left instead of staying and fighting for the relationships I'd had. Here's what I'd say. I know how to build things. I've spent my career understanding what holds weight and what doesn't. Some materials look solid until you test them under load, and then you find out they were never load-bearing to begin with. The question isn't whether you're angry about that. The question is whether you keep building on a foundation you now know can't hold. I left my foundation in Columbus. I built a new one in Nashville. It is quieter and smaller and entirely mine, and it holds. I never responded to Fletcher's text. I don't think about him much anymore. I think about my dad sometimes, on Sundays, the way you think about people who were actually there when it mattered. I think about the house in Columbus, the things I fixed in it over the years, the way the light came through the kitchen window in the morning. Mostly I think about Carl, who has developed a new habit of sleeping directly on my feet, and seems to believe this is helping. It probably is.